Hi everyone. For this episode of Agitprop Interviews, I had the complete pleasure of interviewing a makeup legend, artist Linda Mason. So I'm so excited to be able to have spoken through her career because she really pioneered creating elaborate makeup looks on the runway, and I was so blessed to have the chance to ask her some questions and talk through things, and it was a really interesting convo. Please check out all her work at the end and enjoy the episode.
Yes.
I
All
mean,
right, good.
yes, I didn't want to do a video because I've had to fashion a sort of den to keep the audio condensed because I'm currently staying with my family home in the UK, so I'm trying to get all of my mad work done in very peculiar locations. So I apologise if there's any feedback noise. My producer will edit all of that out.
No, this is good. It's now I can hear you better actually now, so it's getting better. Good. How are you holding up during the during this lockdown thing? Are you okay? Are you?
Yes, I'm doing okay. It feels a bit strange because just before lockdown, France went into their lockdown a week before, and my partner's there and we've got a renovation property there, so he was all kind of like ready to get all the garden stuff arriving, and it was like, well, what do we do? Does he come back to the UK with me, or does he stay there to take care of all the stuff that's still going to arrive? So he's there, so we're kind of parted at the moment, which is sad, but
it's very tough. Oh.
Yeah, it's one of those annoying things, but thank God we have all these devices so we can still talk every day, and it's not too bad.
Yeah.
How about you anyway? Are you doing okay?
Yes, I am. You know, New York is an interesting place to be in at this time because, of course, it had, totally emptied out, and you could still walk around the streets and not really be bothered because I'm actually in Manhattan.
Yes.
And so I got into a little bit of a routine that would get me out first thing in the morning so that I could get going with my day. But each week's been a little different. Obviously, depending on the mood. The first week was, oh, great, let's get a lot of things done. The second week kept going. And then after that, it's like, what is going on here?
Yes.
And you get sort of ups and downs of this is crazy, the world has gone mad. Is this a total disaster area? What's happening? And then I started to read a lot more than I usually do about the whole thing. And sometimes that's actually better, I feel. Once you're more informed, once you've really got into it, then you start feeling you get a better understanding and you can form your own opinions. And so that has been incredibly helpful. I went through, a very difficult week and then came out of it feeling much more positive this week. So it's good that you're doing the interview this week.
Oh, good. And I'm very nervous and excited to talk to you because I've been such a huge fan of your work for many years, and it feels surreal because I don't know why, but I did not know you were from England until I started doing research for the interview, and I was like,
I know.
How did this all
People in France used to think I was American when I worked in Paris. But I think I've been looking, the more I look at your work and what you've done, I'm so impressed, Joseph. It's just amazing.
My goodness.
I'm in, admiration. I had no idea too. I've been discovering a few things. Obviously I looked you up a little bit, but I've still been discovering discovering things and the fact that you won the Prince's Trust Award and all of those wonderful things, the Your Generation competition. I know they're very, very stiff, very, very stiff. And also you do absolutely beautiful work. I was looking at your work and it's really, really beautiful. So
thank you. That means so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think like the majority of my work that's been more professional has kind of missed the radar because my YouTube work that was self-driven, which I find is like my most amateur work, is the stuff that was very successful. So it's like
I like what I saw on YouTube.
Thank you.
Sometimes it's good to even with musicians, when you capture them a little bit more in the raw instead of everything too thought about and transformed. It's just really wonderful to appreciate that, to be able to see things like that. It really is.
Yes. Would you mind if I asked you some questions about...
Go ahead, absolutely. Perfect. Go ahead.
Thank you. So you were born in Sunderland.
Correct.
And you're a Virgo.
Yes.
Yes. Your mum was a fashion designer, so...
Well, she wasn't actually a fashion designer, but she did. She was probably trained as a tailor, but that was before the war. So she didn't really have time to do anything with it, and she was more making our clothes and making dresses that she would see in newspapers and magazines in the 50s that were Dior gowns. She'd see something on the front of the newspaper or in the magazine, and 3 days later she'd be wearing it. It was really fantastic. So it was very inspiring even then. She was like a fairy tale princess.
Was she naturally just gifted and she wanted to just create things, or did she go out and like do it as a discipline?
No, she was naturally creative. And I think also in the 50s, she was naturally creative, but when I think about it, it was not on the level of a normal 50s person. She transformed our house. She had people knock walls down and do the type of construction that didn't happen until years later. She had that, possibly it was the end of the 50s when she started to do that. And then, in future years, I saw a whole street of semi-detached houses sort of totally transform with people doing that same type of construction, adding things on. But, there are things that stick in your mind, like very strongly when you're a child. And I remember her standing there, this housewife, if you want to look at it that way, Sunderland housewife, in a room with men, with the people she was asking, the construction and the architect, whoever it was that she was talking to. I know it was these men that were in the position of power at that time, saying, I want this wall down. I want this. And they're saying, but this can't be done. This can't be done. And I was saying, and she was saying, this is what I want done. And so, I think that is an incredible... It's a very small thing, but I think it's an incredible and empowering thing for a young woman to have seen. I didn't realize until obviously much, much later, but to see her question what had been the authority about what could be done, and transform this, not huge house into something very beautiful with using the light, and so the light that she brought into our home through how she transformed it was incredibly different and very inspiring. And I think that most people, when they want to do a transformation, they say, oh, I need a new room, or I need this, or I need that. She thought through how could she take advantage of everything that was possible from outside to improve what was on the inside, which was really great.
Do you have siblings?
Yeah, I did have a brother. He's passed away now. He was smoking from the age of 11, with what people did, in those days. So obviously his life ended, 53. He was very inspiring too. He was fearless, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And as he knew I was absolutely terrified, he used to do everything to make me more frightened.
Did you notice that there was like a different expectation between you and him, you being a girl and he being a boy? Or did you always see your mum as that example of someone that just went out there and did it?
As far as my brother and I were concerned, we were treated equally. We both did the washing up. We both had to do certain things. Unfortunately for my brother, he was a Boy Scout, and I wanted to go on their outings, and the Scoutmaster's daughter was going. I had to go. So he hated it, obviously. So we were treated absolutely the same. I think that that there was a major thing as far as getting older was concerned. I think I feel like I was, luckier. I feel like I was much luckier because there weren't any expectations of what I could do. Like, he was expected to go into the family business. I was expected to just enjoy my freedom and to choose to do what I wanted to do. So that was the major difference. And I always felt like that was, wasn't the fact that we were treated. I think nowadays, obviously, you could think I could have gone into the family business. Then it was just absolutely not expected. We were baker and confectioners, and we had shops and a bakery. But I think if I'd had the same thing around, I would have tried to interest me actually in the business. I think I was influenced by the sweet shops, all the makeup, all these fabulous, colors and little things, things that were fragile. But like I said, I felt like I was luckier because of that, the freedom I had being a girl.
So how did you start modelling? Because I noticed that in your bio you were modelling in Paris for 5 years. So how did your path lead you there?
You know what? I mean, this is something I never really tell anyone, but when I was a teenager, sort of a young teen, I was taller than most other people. I mean, now it's not terribly tall. I mean, I'm only 5'7". I was 5'7", 5'6.5", 5'7". If you look at it in feet. But I was that height from being about 12 or 13.
Okay.
Younger. So I was really a lot taller than other girls in my class, and I used to make myself smaller. So I think that my mother wanted me to go. She took me through to Newcastle. She had me go to this sort of modelling school or girls' finishing school there where they made you walk and stretch yourself up and walk a little better and everything. So I started to model a little in Newcastle, actually. Then I went to children's nursing school. And then when I went to Paris, I ended up back in Paris, and I trained with Lancôme as a beautician, but that was sort of a long way around. I'd been to Beirut for 3 years. I went back to Paris, and I actually went to Paris because my parents had taken my brother and I there when I was 10, and I fell in love with it, and my mother absolutely loved it. So, it was a sort of a continuation of something she would have loved to have done. So back to the modeling, and in Paris, when I was a little older, I was 23. I was going to work I felt like I was going to work for Lancôme, but they were offering me a job that I didn't want to do, and which meant traveling again. And I had already traveled, and I wanted to really make a home in Paris. So I went out there. I think what was interesting about, what I read about you, Joseph, is that you went out there and looked for opportunities.
Yes.
You did everything, obviously. Everything you were doing it to your utmost, and I'm sure you still do.
Yes.
So it is a question of a work ethic. I had seen my parents work very hard, especially my father. Getting up at 2:00 in the morning and going to the bakery, walking to the bakery, all of this type of thing. And I think that is ingrained in someone, seeing that type of work ethic. So I was in Paris. I was offered this job. I felt like there was some strong intuition and strong thing inside of me said, no, don't take it. It seemed what's the word? Sort of very silly at the time. I was going on a whim. I had no money. I had no job. I had nothing. But I went out and looked for modeling jobs, and I actually ended up modeling. And it was an interesting side to the modeling because it was, my height, which had gone from being tall to staying stationary. So for a model was pretty small. But my build, the shoulders I had, my torso and everything ended up being very good to sort of do the construction of clothes on a certain size. So I did a lot of showroom modeling. I did haute couture. I did showroom, and what was wonderful about that was seeing the creative, the designers actually making those clothes on me, doing those fittings, and seeing how they did it and how it worked, and then also having the opportunity to, either be given or purchase clothes at a very, very cheap price, very reasonable price. And so these were really great quality clothes. So there I went back from the type of clothes my mother used to make, which were basically haute couture, for us as children, for my brother and I as children. We had these beautiful coats, these beautiful outfits. She had the same. She had very beautiful clothes. And then, of course, you go through a period where it was actually a good time because it was an inspirational time because there was Biba and Mary Quant,
yes,
and all of those types, incredibly creative and fun, and it was a great time, the 60s, as far as clothing was concerned. And I remember when I went to Paris, and I went to Paris the first time as sort of an adult when I was 17, 18. This is before I went back. And I went over in mini skirts and bright shoes, and just, it was like, Paris was, it always is a pretty serious place. And they were like, what is going on here? A green miniskirt and orange shoes or something like that. Or maybe it was the other way around. So it was a lot of fun because you were in England or with the British press and what was happening in London, your imagination was encouraged and your freedom was encouraged by that. And it wasn't just a question, it was also an individuality that was encouraged. You were, so where was I? I'm lost.
I was going to ask you about your time in Lebanon. Like what? Because at the time, I assume it was when Lebanon was considered to be like this very beautiful and because there was Brigitte Bardot was frequented there and stuff. So what was it like to be in Lebanon?
Well, I when I first went there, it was an incredible culture shock. It was very different, walking. Of course, I went there in miniskirts.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
So that was 1967. I went there in miniskirts. It was a little of a culture shock, but it was an incredible education because of it gave me an understanding of different cultures. As I grew, I realized the respect that you should have for other people and their cultures. But there was a very free society, and they are an absolutely wonderful, wonderful people, and they still are as hospitable and special. And I feel very much in love with the country after. So I think what was good about that was it broke down this barrier in me. It was not like going to Paris and living in Paris. Paris was Europe. Paris had been there when I was 10. My mother loved the place. It wasn't an easy place, but it was very different from actually going to Beirut. And in one way, the Lebanon was almost easier because, people were just so nice and so helpful. And I was offered, a number of types of jobs, and I just had I loved it.
And in 75, there was a civil war in Lebanon, and so
yes.
did you go back and forth during any of that time, or were you focused more in Paris at that time?
I went back and forth a little in the early 70s because I moved to Paris again, it was sort of the 1970. I went back probably in 71, 72. And by 75, I wasn't going back anymore, but I did have, a relationship that continued on. So my heart was bleeding. I mean, I felt like I needed to go because but then I couldn't. And I started makeup. I was crazy about makeup, just life happens to, and I did get to go back, but a couple of years ago, and I hope to go back again. So
yes.
There's a lot of things I'd like to do. A lot of things.
Yes. We'll have loads of time when we're out of this lockdown situation.
Yeah.
So in Paris, you went from Lancôme to Helena Rubinstein. What led you to Helena Rubinstein? Because they were very kind of innovative in their own right, because they had like automatic mascara and waterproof mascara, which was new for that kind of era. So what led you there?
Well, it was a very interesting time at Helena Rubinstein, but I didn't. What happened was I started working as a freelance makeup artist. This was, I was actually 28 when I started working as a freelance makeup artist. What happened was, I trained with Lancôme when I went back to Paris in the early 70s. They wanted to work with me, and then I decided against it, and I modeled, but I was never a great model, and I never earned any, not, very much money. I just sort of survived.
That's the same as me.
Yeah. But I was doing something, it was fun. It was enjoyable. And then I was, but because I loved makeup, I kept teaching it in this sort of a club, sort of a modeling club where, no, it was Elle Club. It had been started by the magazine Elle. And so I would teach it, a couple of times a week. Groups of women would come in. So I got to train with different makeup products, because then I had to speak about them and teach them and things like this. And at one of these events, one of the women explained the job of a freelance makeup artist to me. And I thought, oh my gosh, I could earn money doing this. And she said to me, if you would like to I'll introduce you to our photography. If you would like to do some makeup for us for our press release, I would love you to do it. And I thought, so fantastic, really so fantastic. So she introduced me to a really great photographer called Sammy George. And I started working with him day and night. And he always had these gorgeous model girlfriends. And so all we did was test. And he would let me take 3 hours, 4 hours, any amount of time on one makeup, which was, I had no idea how fast you're supposed to do the makeup. You speed up later. But he was so patient. And it was so wonderful. So I built up a portfolio. And I went out, the same thing, at one point I thought, oh, you're supposed to be like faithful to the one photographer. And then I realized, well, he doesn't have any work for me. I've got to earn a living with this. And
yes.
I went out and found other photographers and called magazines and art directors and editors. And I didn't quite even know who to call at magazines, because I was so new to this type of work. And then as I started working, Helena Rubinstein approached me. I was approached by them because my name started to get around. And people started talking about me because I was putting myself out there all the time. And, sort of basically, oh, where did she come from? What's she doing here and stuff like that. They approached me to see if I was interested in doing their, the makeup for them, sort of the makeup looks, and working for the collections, because they were doing a lot of collections then. And they actually had a fashion line at the time. They had a boutique on Faubourg Saint-Honoré, and they were very, very, very in advance, very in advance. There were some incredible people working for them from the fashion industry. There was a Melka Trianton, who was a big stylist, who worked with Thierry Mugler and lots of other people styling their fashion shows. And there was Jacqueline de Guiteau, who was this. She seemed like just an airhead socialite, but she wasn't. She was an incredibly talented, hardworking woman, but who had this ability. She had so much charm, and she had the ability to make everything seem so easy. And I learned a lot from these people that I met actually through and I got the job. They asked me to put in a few drawings, and I didn't know how to draw. And I went out and I was sitting down. I sat down in my place and I thought, well, what can I do? I can't draw. And I thought, what was I good at in school? I was good at geometry. So I started doing squares and triangles, and I made my faces that way, with the geometrical shapes. And I got the job at Helmer Rubinstein.
So that's incredible. Do you mean you broke the face down into those shapes, and then you were like, the eye, there's like a...
Yeah, then I drew everything into that. And sometimes I'd use objects. Like I remember one of the sketches I did, I'd put it, I don't know why, but some sort of like a salt and pepper shaker as the nose and mouth or something ridiculous, but I don't know. I would experiment a little bit with those, the geometrical faces.
That's interesting. Do you feel like we are spoiled for choice now with all of the amazing products that we've got on the market? Because obviously there was much more of a limitation at the time when at the start.
Yes, there was a limitation, but what was really interesting is you searched for things. So what were, for instance, when I would go around the Rubinstein to do the collections for the designers in Italy, and there was this little perfumery called Parfumerie Ditta Bianchi, and she had these lipsticks from the 40s and 30s and 40s and things, these really old lipsticks. So we managed to get dry lipsticks because Thierry Mugler always liked the lips very matte and dry and strong. And I managed to find lipsticks from then. And so you had to really search out things. You'd really go, what was really wonderful, I mean, in Italy and in Japan, when I went to Japan, and in Paris even, all of these little shops that you could go to look for things. Or even I found stuff at the time in Galeries Lafayette, which, I found like the matte pastel colors.
Yes.
And you know that matte colours, even now, are pretty difficult to find. Good matte colours.
They're so difficult without, especially the bright colours, because they kind of fall apart as you apply them, don't they, sometimes?
Yeah, they don't, they go on. I mean, the thing is, I think if they're the bright colours, they fall apart. You have to if you put creams under them.
Yes.
I would always, that's the same thing. I'd apply a cream to the lid first and then blend them into the cream. It made it a bit more difficult, but... you work with things, and then so it was good. But then what was great was, like I said, being able to go out there, visit these small shops, take your time, look at everything, test everything. It was great. I mean, now I feel sorry because there are some great places here in New York. There are, but that you can do that at, but it's still not the same as being able to make discoveries in Japan and places like that. I mean, I discovered, Shumera.
Yes.
I discovered when I was in Japan before he was well known. I don't know whether he is as well known anymore.
Oh my God, I love him.
Yeah, and I when I was in Japan, I lived there for a couple of months. He contacted me and said he'd like to meet me and all of this. And I had a meeting with him. He was really wonderful. But I had checked out his products before, and I thought they were great. The colors were great. Everything fabulous. And I hated his packaging. He had this dark green packaging. And I thought his colors were just amazing. So when we went into the meeting, I said, he was such a gentleman, such a very, very wonderful, special person. And he asked my opinion on the product, obviously, and I said, how much I liked it and how the colors were fabulous. I said, but how much I hated his packaging. Dior at the time had, that dark blue packaging, like a heavy plastic.
Yes.
And his was the same, but in dark green. And I told him I thought it sort of was too much like the Dior and too heavy. you couldn't see the colors and you needed something to see the colors. And then, a couple of years later, a few years later, he came out with that beautiful transparent packaging, which was a first, which was really beautiful.
Very clever.
So I was very happy to see he'd taken note of my opinion.
Definitely.
So,
I recently was working with Pouge in Paris, and one of the ladies from the magazine Beauty Papers, Maxine, trained with Shu, and she trained with him, and she was telling me stories in Paris about how they have to learn facial things and they have to stand on one foot like a flamingo. And I was like, is this real? It just sounded so elaborate, and I was like, my goodness.
They have to stand on one foot?
Yes, I was like, it just...
Why?
I was just fascinated by these stories. But I was like, oh my goodness.
When did she train there?
I think she was a makeup artist in the 80s going into the 90s, but she...
Yes, that's after me. That was the big time, but I trained more in the late 60s, early 70s, yeah.
Yes, and kept on going. So when you started to work with more of the fashion shows, it was kind of like a first to see the makeup reflect the idea of the clothes, and you were very much part of that change. So you obviously explaining about your mum making clothes and how the brands you work with linked fashion with art. You always saw it kind of like as an extension of the clothes. So when did you first start to create looks for fashion shows? And was it more like how you've explained it with the brand Helena? Was it like it just was a natural transition from the beauty to the clothes, or did you have to kind of fight to get the designers to be expressive in the makeup? Because I know some people are very strict on their ideas.
It depended on the designer. For instance, the very first designer I worked with, Angelo Tarlazzi, it was for the Patou collection. And I watched the girls show the clothes, before I actually did the makeup for his show. And I thought the makeup was so horrific with the clothes. And his clothes were absolutely beautiful, really, really beautiful. He was incredibly talented, Angelo Tarlazzi. And so obviously the makeup lines had a selection of colors they wanted to push for that season. But those colors can be used anyway. They can be used differently. So, okay, they want to use these colors. But it's also a question of how you use something. And so I was determined to have the girls looking fabulous. And I was determined to have them looking, as much as you can bring out your personality, your own individual personality, there is a way of using the same set of colors on different people and bringing out their personality. You might, so with Angelo, I didn't devise, like with Thierry, it was a look and we had to transform all of these models into this particular look. With Angelo, first of all, it was using these colors, making the girls feel fabulous and using them in a way that they could feel comfortable, and yet it still was new as the clothes were. And obviously that worked, because the models who I worked on, a couple of those girls, there was one, Anna, who the designers loved. She was really wonderful. She worked for Thierry and all of those. And then there was another one, Wallace, but I think it was mainly Anna in the beginning. And they all said, would you like to do so-and-so, Jean-Paul Gaultier, Thierry Mugler and Anne-Marie Beretta, and they introduced me to these other designers. So I started to work with these other designers. Now, it depended on the designer. Yeah, there were people who said, and it doesn't happen from one day to the next, that you get people's confidence and they basically say, do whatever you want. And also, Thierry Mugler, Anne-Marie Beretta, they had a very strong image of the type of woman and the type of face that they wanted. And I learned a lot from Thierry, because he used to be a ballet dancer and he loved those long lines, those double lines, the white inside of the eye. And he also liked it perfectly done. Perfectly done. And I mean, this is like a big, even then, they were doing the show on quite a big stage, not as big as they do nowadays, but still in the late 70s they were doing, because this is the late 70s, they were doing it on a fairly big stage, and it was still had to be perfect. So we did about 2 or 3 trial makeups, and the same with Anne-Marie, 2 or 3 trial makeups. And then, it went through. Then I did a lot of shows in Italy, and that was really wonderful. Each designer was very, very different, and it was an incredible exercise, because sometimes we do 5 shows a day. I was in charge of like 2 or 3 sets of makeup artists. These were Helena Rubinstein makeup artists who lived in Italy. And so I doing that, I don't know. It's like I realized that's the type of thing I love. I love working under a certain type of pressure.
Yes.
And, with incredibly creative, and it's not just the creativity, it's the way they are, the way the team they have that they work with, and how much of a perfectionist they are, and how much of a vision, they're visionaries, but they're visionaries and people who are able to execute it. I think fashion shows, I hope they continue, because they are, they are an amazing thing, an amazing coming together of talents. And look at Vivienne Westwood. She's fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And think of the evolution that she's gone through, but she's always had this very definite style in a way, but definite style. So to be able to work with all of these people has just been amazing. It was just an amazing time for me. At the end of the 70s and the beginning of the 80s was when I worked with these designers.
It's amazing. It's really, really amazing. A lot
John
of
Galliano.
Yes, that
fabulous, absolutely fabulous, and such a gentleman. And Yoji Yamamoto. Rei Kawakubo from Comme des Garçons. I was very fortunate to work with her when she first came to Paris. I'd seen Rei's collection in Japan, and I fell madly in love with it. Not seeing it specifically as something I could wear, but seeing a designer who had totally created collections that enhanced the beauty of the Japanese woman, that I felt the traditional Japanese kimonos enhanced. If you look at the Japanese woman in a kimono, I mean, the beauty, I mean, it's just an incredible beauty. And I felt like Rei Kawakubo, really enhanced and emphasized the beauty of the Japanese women. I love Issei too, Issei Miyake. I was working with in Paris long before anyone. But Issei, his clothes, I felt were more westernized, more for a westernized, more for an American or a European, or as opposed to pieces are good for the Japanese too, but it wasn't just some vision which was specifically for the type of woman that has sort of more delicate features. And just okay, I could go on and on.
Oh no, I love it. It's interesting because a lot of the shows you've worked on, even when the makeup of the show is subtle, the colours are correct, which I think is quite rare for the time, especially on darker skin models, because there wasn't a lot of foundations for darker skin, and they sometimes look grey in some of the images. But if you look at the early Mugler shows, when there are darker skin models, the foundations were always almost mixed to match. And I was going to ask you, because obviously you're...
Yes, well, this was, I looked at I had a lot of trouble with that in the beginning, because all also, the shades of the skin. There's so many different shades. There's more the blue, there's more the yellow, there's more the red. And so all the different nationalities. And I think the type of model that they were using in the late 70s was a lot more varied than later on in the 80s. The darker skinned models seemed to go out of fashion at a certain time. Whereas when I started, I had to find things, and I used to look at what the models themselves were using, and that was a product called Fashion Fair, which I believe still exists here in the States. And, I saw how heavy it was, and a lot of the colors were very red, a little too red. After that, I had to try to find things that were more yellow, because some of the skins, I thought the beauty was in that shade. And I mean, for instance, the black girls who are really black, it was definitely more blue. So I would actually take some blue maybe and mix it in. Or I'd do the same thing with the yellow. I'd take some yellow, I'd find yellow and mix that in. So that's how I figured it out. And then, so I always feel that I've managed to, but it's true, I hate that grayness. And
it was so funny.
Even now, I mean, even before, I still happen sometimes, you think it's not going to be gray and you put it on and you think, oh no, what have I done?
Is when you look at some of these images, you can definitely see where there is an artistic kind of approach, because you really mix the colour like it's an oil or an acrylic paint, and the colours reflect that. But then you see some of the fashion shows and it's like a pink sort of cadaver colour. It's really strange to look back.
Yes.
But we're spoiled for choice now, thank goodness, that there is so much inclusion with the foundations and things like that, because now you can mix them, but there are loads of options now.
Yes, exactly. I mean, MAC has some fantastic shades too. I mean, all of the lines have some great shades, darker shades, deeper shades. I still find I made, when I had the Art of Beauty and the boutique gallery place I had in Soho, I used to mix my own foundations.
Yes.
And I know that I had the absolute best one for somebody who had a deeper, yellower skin. I really made a point of making that sort of perfect. And of course, the really pale one, because I'm a redhead and I always had trouble finding something really pale. So, of course, there were two shades I knew that I'd really, really done well.
Yes. That's so true with the paler shades. I remember even when I was 16 and 17, I was going to Tokyo for the first time, and you couldn't buy drugstore foundations that were pale. And then when I went to Tokyo...
You still can't.
No, you can't.
You still can't. I know. You look and you think they're pale and they're dull.
Yes.
They're dull. I agree.
It's so funny. But then when I went to Tokyo, I found pale shades and mixes, and I was like a rosy mix or like a white mix. And I was like, it's so bizarre how we're thank goodness it's like, I think I caught the last part of the world before the internet kind of allowed us to buy things from overseas, because I saw it just before you could access everything online. But it was surreal to me to think, oh, you can go to a country where Asian people have traditionally darker skin and you find the paler shades than you can find in England. But there you go.
Yeah, I think it's because a lot of the British people want to be tanned.
Yes.
Don't you think?
Yes, I totally agree. So in the 80s, the Wall Street Journal did a feature, or they kind of reviewed your work. So they reviewed you and they said you took face painting out of punk and put it into high fashion. So I was interested to think about how subculture kind of impacted on you as an individual and how that moved into your work. Did you see yourself as punk?
No, no, I didn't at all. I just see myself as a person, doing something they're passionate about and experimenting and taking risks. And what happened was, towards the end of my time in Paris, I started to experiment more and more in photographers. I did I worked on some experimental work with a photographer there. And when I came to New York, I was thinking, it's like my odd side came out, and I was thinking, let's have fun here, because I'd worked so much in Paris. I thought I knew it all, of course. No, but I had a lot of experimental work in my portfolio, and some of the big agents said, you're never going to work with that. You have to tame it down. It's got to be this. It's got to be that. And I sort of looked and I thought, well, you know what? I really want to do what I want to do, and I was thinking about becoming a film director, actually, and I took a course at NYU, and then I got caught up in the makeup world again, because I got people like incredible photographers like Deborah Turbeville, who I'd worked with in Paris, sort of, asking for me again, and she was amazing. And then I can't remember the first job I did with Stephen Meisel, and I started to work with Stephen Meisel, and that was absolutely fabulous. And he would let me do whatever I wanted. So I did whatever I wanted, and he had this great light that came down on the girl's face, and so I could start just making them up when they were in action instead of in the dressing room. And I worked with a lot of other really, really lovely photographers too. Very, very nice photographers, Art Kane, Richard Afton, and I could go on and on about that time.
What was it like to work with Avedon?
Same thing. He's an absolute gentleman, very, very supportive. He had a makeup artist, I think it's Rosemary Schneider, who he worked with most of the time for most of his commercial work, and he'd wanted to do something a little different, and she had recommended that he work with me for that particular job. So it was already a creative job with Iman and other people, and then I worked with him again on little things a little more commercial, when I guess Rosemary wasn't available. And he was always absolute gentleman, and very, like I said, just great. It was nice to work with him. It wasn't quite the same as with Stephen. Stephen was more the energy, the motion. He was more calm, more this, more. So it was also a question of age. Stephen was starting out then, so it was and just willing to do anything. We could try anything, and I went around the magazines showing the work that I wanted to do, and every time I was on a photo shoot, this is before Stephen, every time I was on a photo shoot, I would try to do something creative too. Sometimes people would look at me like I was out of my mind, but I think it was the same thing. You leave an impression, because it was pretty boring before.
Yes.
And then things started to change. So things started to change, and gradually, people, certain people understood I could fortunately do other types of makeup, because, getting advertising campaigns at the time brought in a lot of money.
Yes.
Commercials and advertising and all of that. So when it came to editorial, there were times where obviously I did pretty boring stuff, but, you can't be on the ball every time. Yeah, that's it. I was thinking about that today, and I was thinking about not being afraid to make mistakes, not being afraid to do things that other people say, what on earth is that?
Yes.
It's so important that no matter what age you're at, no matter when it is, to be able to move forward, continue moving forward within the type of field that you've chosen.
It's very interesting as well, because I think a lot of people forget that the photography was filmed. So once the picture was taken, it wasn't retouched and remastered. It was exactly what was happening on the set. And thank God lighting changes things. But now you kind of erase the mistakes. And I think that sometimes
in New York, there was still a lot of retouching,
okay,
but it was done differently. And there was a lot of retouching, but not like now. It's true. You don't know what I mean. I've seen some pictures of myself. I thought, oh my gosh, what did they put on? That's incredible. I want that filter.
I kind of like that though sometimes. Like I grew up, as much as I grew up the odd kid that loved artistic things, I also loved all the new video games that came out when I was a kid. And I like creating things digitally, almost like a digital art. And
Yes.
I'm interested in creating filters and making mistakes with like the digital stuff now. I think all of that glitchy things in digital is very interesting. But
yes. Yeah, it's part of the way, it's part of life, and it's interesting. It depends on, I mean, one of the books I put out was, called Teen Makeup. And
Yes.
I did it with my daughter when she was in high school and her friends. And I was determined to leave them a little bit as they were. In other words, if they I didn't want a heavy base on their skin, because at the time I wanted it to be something that showed their freshness and just had them playing with color and trying to, capture a little bit of the fun aspect of it. But then I was absolutely slaughtered on Amazon about, the skins, they're so ugly, that it's this and that. I'm thinking, well, I actually did that on purpose and I looked in the book and I thought, they're not that ugly. They're just, you can see the skin. What's the problem?
Yeah. It's so before its time, because now we're talking about not retouching, showing people as they are, whether it be plus size people and showing what real shapes like not everything's perfect. The other book that I thought was really amazing is the one with Paulina Poroskova on the front, which is The Art of Beauty. So how did you come about creating these books? Because when we've already discussed that you grew up with this work ethic and you've created your own artistic outlets in various different mediums, whether it be film, whether it be your presentations of jewelry. I've seen on your website you've got so many amazing different things. I love the mermaid's mirror. It's so nice. So what led you to create a book? Was it to teach people, or was it to show people different ideas?
I think I had a book out, and you probably haven't seen that one, in the 80s.
Okay.
That I started. I started it in the 70s, not long after I'd started makeup. I was going to do a book that was called The Art of Makeup. But, Kevin O'Quinn did The Art of Makeup later on. So I was going to do The Art of Makeup. And I was going around, I was coming over to New York, and I was sort of, showing people, going to different publishers. I didn't quite know how to go about it. A little bit like saying, I want to do this book, and it's The Art of Makeup, and I did that over a period of a few years, and then I thought, well, this isn't going to work. In any case, do I really want to do that? Let me do something that I'm into at the moment, and that can have a more fun aspect to it. So then I thought, what am I into at the moment? And I was into astrology, so I thought, okay. There was a big book out in the 70s that was sun signs. That's right. So I said, let me do sun sign makeovers. So then I just get all of these girls from the different signs and study that, and I can look into more about, because I was also noticing, when you're on photo shoots, how certain models were, depending on their sign, and
yes.
the variety of girls and the characteristics. And I thought, so and so's a Gemini. There were a lot of Geminis in modeling in that era, and then there still were. I believe Linda's a Gemini too. But in the 70s, when I started out, there were quite a lot of Geminis because of the versatility, I guess. So I thought, let me do this. Then I can study that and figure it out and all of this. So I wrote a book then, and I did photographs for it. I thought, well, that'll also, I'd like to sort of experiment with photography. So I'll start doing that a little bit and experiment with photography. And I get these very lovely models that I'm working with, and we'll do this. And it'll be like tests and this and that. So that was the first book. Now, it took like 5 years to get that published. And I don't know how I managed to get it published. It was pure luck. And I had moved on by the time I got that published, it was so tough. And I said, I will never, ever write a book again. It is too difficult. And then I don't know, I thought there was this handbook that I loved, a makeup book that I had. And I thought if ever I was to write a book, I'd like to do something that's a handbook that's handy for somebody to have, to look at, to learn from, for people wanting to be makeup artists, because everybody used to ask me many, many questions. Now you can just go on the internet and find the answers to everything. But then, of course, there wasn't really the internet. So I thought, I want this little book that somebody could have. And so I thought about it. And then one day I met this book agent, who was the agent of a friend of mine. And she said, oh, I want that book. I want that handbook you're talking about. Can you put a dummy together? And I thought, yeah, okay. Well, do I really want to do another book? I put the layout together. I put it together and I gave it to her. And she said, yeah, I have one editor I think it would be good for. And the thing is, the editor said no. So then she went around other people, and about a year later came back to the same one who said yes. It's all a question of timing. Whenever you do anything, no matter how good you are, if it's the right time, then and that editor was really great. I did that book. It wasn't exactly how I'd envisaged it. I'd sort of seen it, but I'm still very happy with it, because it enabled me to, answer those questions that people were asking me, and also to go back to the photographers who I had used to work with, because this came out in the beginning of the 90s, I believe. Yeah. And so I got in contact with all of these photographers that I had worked with before, and asked them, people like Paolo Roversi and even Stephen, and they were all so incredibly generous with the usage for their photos. They said, go ahead, use it. That it was a lot of work going back and finding people and asking if I could use them, because this wasn't a big art book. Like I said, it was a little handbook. And that was, what was it called again?
The Art of Beauty one?
Pardon?
The Art of Beauty, that one?
Exactly. So, thank you. So each book I've made has been also a part of, I've tried to incorporate my life at that time into it, which has been really enjoyable. I mean, Eye Candy, which was the most successful, is probably the one that, what it was the art director that I worked with on the other two makeup books, The Art of Beauty and Teen Makeup, asked me to do the Eye Candy book. And she was, that's incredibly, sort of, she knew. She was younger than me. She knew what the audience was looking for at the time, something about makeup. I mean, now it's incredibly tame. I was taming down what I usually do. And they tamed it down even further. But that was, and then, Makeup for Ageless Beauty was, I did it with my clients, for women of my age and even a bit, younger, because there were some 10, 20 years younger, who were having problems and were feeling like they had to change their makeup. And some of them needed more encouragement to actually stay with their makeup, because I don't say, tone down your makeup because you're getting older. I say there are certain things you can do to alter your makeup and say, but it's not necessarily if you feel really comfortable and happy with a very strong eye makeup, it can sometimes it becomes a part of your personality, and that is sometimes the best way for you to keep on going.
So true. And I think that it's so important as well when people are given permission, almost. It's like some people, I think they forget they're allowed to experiment Like I always, when I do my mum's makeup, my mum really doesn't wear anything, and it's like even today we were talking about, like I was showing her how to use eyebrow gel, and she was like, "Oh, I'll get this everywhere," and I was like, "What happens if you do get it everywhere? It's makeup; it will wash off. You're allowed to have fun."
You did a beautiful job on your mum, by the way.
Oh
you
my
did
God!
I love those. I thought was like, I think that is proof of a excellent makeup artist, because there are not many makeup artists that can do older women. Are not. They're absolutely terrified of them. And I remember I was very touched one day. I had this younger makeup artist who worked at Sephora come up to me, and she said, "I just want to thank you for your book." And I said, "Oh, I was thinking eye candy." She said, "No, makeup for ageless beauty," because I think it just opens. With that book, I feel like it opens up to a better understanding of makeup for older women, and a lot of my clients, the ones that used to come to see me at the Art of Beauty, in Soho, they were women who had never worn makeup.
Yes,
they were fairly attractive women. They a little bit looked down on it. They were intellectuals, and then they realized as they were getting older, they just wanted something to brighten them up. Your skin goes a little more yellow. You don't quite have the spark and the brightness that you have, the freshness of youth, say, and you want something to bring that back. And if you can teach that woman also the fun of makeup, because I have had so much enjoyment from it. I have got so much enjoyment. I want to share this enjoyment with people. And, I've had women converted that never wore makeup, become makeup junkies almost, but not makeup junkies thinking they had to go out looking like that every day, but makeup junkies that knew that they could enjoy it. And It didn't diminish who they were. It actually enhanced who they were, because you're looking at yourself more like this art piece that you're putting out into the world, and you're having fun. You're having fun doing your makeup. Come on, Joseph.
Yes.
You know how fun it is.
Oh my goodness, I'm a different person every time I do it. Definitely.
Yeah.
So
we're very lucky. I think it's a great business.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I think I look upon it as being sort of a part of the art thing too.
Yes,
painting and all of that.
Well, I was going to actually ask you and find out a little bit more about this, but I think you kind of answered it throughout. Even the name of the book is The Art of Beauty, and it's kind of like you everything you do is an expression of art. It hasn't got a strict medium. It's expressive, and there's some incredible images you've done where the makeup is on the body and it's painted on, and it looks like there's a texture to it. There is an experiment in it, and you also have done this successfully on canvases and produced beautiful, colourful, bright, expressive art pieces. Is this like your focus and your passion of the right now? It is, and it has been, I guess, for a number of years. I think it all stemmed from, as a makeup artist, we're perfectionists.
Yes. So it was a sort of a breaking out of that and having to do something a little bit more freestyle, like, putting on big, I don't know. I think it's all a whole life journey. For instance, the actual energy that goes into doing a fashion show. When you're actually painting somebody like that, you recapture a little of that energy, because you've got to keep going. You've got to find the place. You've got to do it. It's sort of a whole energy thing, as well as a combination of colors, like looking at all of these different colors through your life and putting them together quickly and figuring it out. And then if you've prepared, if you know your materials well, and you have prepared them well, then there are so many ways you can use them in, and so much fun you can have with them. And it's like capturing, I do it trying to capture something in the person, within the person, and I find like it's great because it gives them a sort of mask to hide behind when you're actually painting them like that. also it's an odd experience. I don't know whether you've tried it yet. Maybe I should try it. Maybe I should paint you.
Oh my God, I would die.
Do you come to New York at all?
Oh, it's on my list. I was meant to be there at the moment.
Oh, you were. All right.
We'll have to do something. I'll have to get you, take you out for dinner or lunch or something when we were allowed to travel again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. So, in any case, it's quite an experience to be painted like that. It's nothing as painstaking. I mean, there's an artist who I absolutely adore, who I think is incredible, who is Joanne Gare.
Yeah.
I think she is amazing. But it's nothing to do with that type of art. The way I do the makeup is, sort of a spontaneous, it's quick. I prepare a certain amount of colors. It's more an energy, an inner thing, something, you're sort of creating a dance, between the model and the artist. It's this sort of dance, and so that's what I'm doing. And then I captured, obviously, look at certain ways it can look very ugly, certain ways it can look very beautiful. And I was looking back on some photographs that I had done, because when I did Makeup Ageless Beauty, I decided to do it on these models that I'd worked with in the 80s and the 90s, because I was using them for makeup, some of them for Makeup for Ageless Beauty. And there's Frederique van der Waal, who I'm sure you probably know, because she's, she was probably later in the 90s. She's one of the younger ones, but she has now, I think, a flower company. She's Dutch, but she lives in the States. Very, very beautiful woman. So I painted her, and I was looking back at some of these photos that I had done, and I had put aside because they were so strong. She was so strong but now I love them so much, because they're really like a painting, and it really takes, you really discover the person through their personality, through what you do when you paint them like that. So I have to do something with those particular photographs, because I really, really love them.
Oh, wow. I can't wait to see them.
There's so many that are so good, because I usually do, a pretty full series. And like I say, some I like straight away, and some looking back over them that I really appreciate them.
That's funny. You always see something magical in things that you've kind of dismissed in the moment. When you look back on them, you're like, oh my God, that was so good.
Yeah, that's why you have to be careful with digital, because, some people get rid of absolutely everything.
Yes.
And except the ones that they're keeping. And that's sort of a little dangerous, I find.
Yes, I'm an archivist, if that's a word. I keep all my files on. I've got so many hard drives full of pictures from when I was even a child. I just like taking pictures of things I see.
Well, I hope you're organizing them well. That's all I can say.
Yes.
It takes forever going back through some.
So true. Well, I will wrap up here and say, where can everyone find you? So you have a website and you're on social media.
Yes, I have. I think, I have two Instagram accounts. I have Linda Mason NYC, which, and then I have Beauty Art Makeup, which is more the makeup beauty type of thing. Linda Mason NYC, I try to keep it more art, but there's a lot of makeup on there too. And I have a few sites. I have a beauty art makeup website. It's www.beautyartmakeup.com. I have a Linda Mason site, which is the sort of older archived site that I haven't had the strength to take away. I don't know whether I want to, it's different. I have difficulty getting rid of stuff. And then I have LindaMasonGallery.com, LindaMasonGallery.com, which is the art. Then, what else do I have?
Well, I'll add all the links to the description of when this is posted.
And then I have the videos on Vimeo.
Yes.
And I have, what I was thinking about too, you might want to take this out. I was thinking I would love to do videos starting with somebody like you that I
Ooh,
would put on, because I have a YouTube site,
okay.
which I never developed. I sort of set it up there and everything, and I've put one video that I made a couple of weeks ago up there about COVID-19, but it's a makeup video. It's me. I don't know whether you've seen it or not.
I
Have a
haven't
look.
seen that one. I'll have to check it out after.
Yeah, I haven't publicized it at all yet because I did it for this older sister of mine who's a choreographer, and she'd asked me to do a piece, a choreographical piece for the Ailey Theatre, and it was cancelled, obviously due to. So then she asked the artists who she'd asked to do this show. She then asked them to make a contribution to a video, to do a 1 minute long video. So I did that, and I have it actually on YouTube and on Vimeo at the moment. So
Fantastic.
it's called COVID-19.
I will add the
But,
details of that.
then let me see. But yeah, would you be open to it if I interviewed you on Zoom or something? I have to figure out how to do it.
Oh my God, I would love to. I'd absolutely be honoured. It would be such a pleasure.
Well, I was looking at your life, and I was thinking of all the questions I wanted to ask you, and I thought, well, I can't do it today because he's going to be asking me the questions.
Oh, well, you're the much more interesting person, I can tell you. I'm very...
I don't think so, not at all. All right. So let me give it more thought and then figure out how, if I can start these like next week or something.
Oh, I'd love that. That would be such a pleasure. All right, then, Linda.
Are you still going to be with your family next week?
I think so. If I've not killed them all by then.
Right. All right. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you. And take care. And I'll speak to you via email.
Right. And thank you so much for asking me. And it was good getting to talk with you.
It was a pleasure. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you everyone for listening to this interview. I was very, very, very nervous, but also super excited. So hopefully it came across well. Please check out Linda's work. She has an amazing array of different ventures, from her artistry to products and more. So I'll pop her links in the description below. All right, guys, take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.